City of Stevens Point Personnel Committee meeting, recorded March 10, 2025.
I have 6:56. I'll call the Personnel Committee meeting to order. Manager Frosch, could we get a roll call, please?
Kneebone?
Here.
Roderick?
Here.
Lang?
Here.
Guthrie?
Here.
Steinmetz?
Here.
Thank you. First item, only item I should say, second item on the agenda is a request from Alderperson Guthrie for a discussion and possible action on the creation of a city administrator position. Do we need a motion for the committee to discuss, and then we can open it up?
Your call, Madam Chairman.
Let's just do a discussion first. There was a lot of information in the agenda. I hope everybody had a good chance to look at that. And at this point, I'll give it to Alder Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm happy to make an initial statement. Okay, so since President Christensen encouraged the Personnel Committee to explore the topic of adding a city administrator approximately a year ago, this committee has diligently done so. This has included reflective conversation in committee, soliciting staff comment, hearing from experts around the state, and looking at models of similarly sized cities around Wisconsin. It feels appropriate after months of conversation to determine if the committee would like to recommend this addition to the full council or not. If it is recommended the council adopts the change, we'll have a position description to agree on. We'll have ordinances and policies to update, a search to administer, a budget to negotiate, and we'll want to give ample humane notice to anyone interested in running for mayor in the future that the nature of the mayor's role would be changing with this addition. Based on the conversations that we have had and the experts who have weighed in, I am interested in pursuing the addition of a city administrator position to onboard during the next mayoral election in 2027 so that they can be seated and settled in just prior to the mayor electoral results. I have asked Attorney Beveridge to draw up draft documents for the purpose of this committee to consider the concept, not to get into all of the weeds or details of how we would in detail pursue the change in the months and years to come. My warm thanks to Attorney Beveridge for the time, research, and contribution he's made to the packet tonight so that this body has some draft documents that we'll have at our fingertips during conversation. I believe that a city administrator will be key to streamlining facilities and operations as we move into a new city hall. Will be well positioned to lead the implementation of the strategic plan for the city and other policies set forth by council, including reporting out to council and the mayor on iterative change towards policy objectives, and will be critical to finding efficiencies and solving problems that bridge departmental silos, many of which relate to budget. The future mayors will have an ample portfolio of work advocating for and celebrating this great city in the public eye, which our current mayor does so well, while the administrator can put their head down and maximize administrative effectiveness alongside our dedicated department directors and their teams. So thank you, colleagues, for entertaining my calling this question this evening. I'm looking forward to hearing what other members of the committee have to say and also hearing from the public, other alders, staff that would like to come forward. With that, I yield.
Okay, comments from the committee.
I wonder if we might hear anything from the public first and then provide some additional comment in case that influences it.
Okay, all right, we'll open up the floor.
Madam Chairman, you've got someone online with their hand up as well.
Okay, you want to start with the online person?
Your call.
Okay, let's do that, and then anyone that's here that wants to speak, just approach the podium.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Mr. Mayor. I assume I have the floor?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening again. My name is Jim Payne. I'm the mayor of Superior, Wisconsin. Apologize for not reaching out to you sooner. I stumbled across the stories. Superior's a long ways away from Stevens Point, so you'll forgive me if I missed some of the news down there. I wanted to weigh in on this subject if I can be helpful, and I'm not familiar with your committee structure, but I'd be happy to answer any questions. The city of Superior went through a similar process where we explored the possibility of a city administrator and reducing the mayor's role to part-time and making it largely ceremonial. It was proposed in late 2019. We discussed it in 2020 and ultimately put the question to a referendum in late 2020 in the fall election. I just wanted to offer a few pieces of advice from that experience. We researched it extensively. We put a lot of work into it, had a lot of public feedback, and while these are different communities, Superior is in many ways a sister city to Stevens Point. We're very similar in size. We have quite a bit in common, even if you don't have our wonderful Lake Superior. Some of the things that we learned in the process are a lot of the things you hear about administrator and mayor forms of government are largely not true. People generally believe that they make government more efficient, that they can save money, that they free up the mayor to work on other issues. The facts show that that's not true at all. In fact, this has been studied academically in the state of Wisconsin. This is a study, I'd be happy to forward it to you, but it's not even a 10-year-old study where forms of government, manager, council, strong mayor and council, and mayor administrator council were all studied for efficiency and cost effectiveness, and they found by far the strongest performance where you have the lowest taxes, the lowest amount of spending, and the most fiscal efficiency are where you have a mayor and a council without an administrator intervening. An administrator generally raises costs over just a mayoral form of government. It creates real barriers between the public, the services of the public and their elected officials. That's something we experience up north quite a bit. Both Douglas County and the city of Duluth, Minnesota next door have an administrator operating the government that slows down the business of the mayor and city councilors who are often held up. They call them city councilors, so do we. I see you're using the term alder, which is technically correct. Good for you. Access from the public to government is meaningfully reduced. I don't want to go through my whole list because I don't want to occupy your whole meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions. But as we looked at it, we found that it really would not save us any money. In fact, it would cost quite a bit, possibly without any meaningful change in your government at all, most likely without any change. Your city attorney describes it very well. The mayor doesn't lose any power in that plan. The mayor's powers are set by statute, would still be in charge of all of the staff, would still be the chief executive officer. You'd just be paying that person less, and that hurts your recruitment for that position and forces a lot of mayors to seek another job. In Superior, this is the only job I have. It's the only job I'm allowed to have. We actually prohibit the mayor from having any other gainful employment to make sure we work full-time in the interest of citizens. I also read the financial impacts for that your comptroller or finance director wrote up. That's also what we found. You're not really going to get any reduction in siloing. That doesn't really play out in any administrator systems. They generally function the exact same way. What you get is a position upwards of $200,000 a year. Almost always that will go to a person from outside your community. It's very difficult to find a person with those skills within communities of our size. It's almost always a natural or a national search. So I would exercise extreme caution in this. The last thing I would tell you, I mentioned at the top that we put this out to a referendum. During the whole conversation, the public was really furious about this. The idea of reducing their mayor, whoever that may be, to a part-time status, to not work full-time in their interest, was really offensive to the people of Superior. That referendum failed 70 to 30. It was actually a little more than 70 to 30. And what I found telling, obviously, like all mayors, I assume Mayor Wiesa as well, I have plenty of people in the community that don't like me and the job that I'm doing. Many of them voted against the idea of a part-time mayor because they wanted the ability to elect somebody that they would support that would be able to do that work full time. The very last thing I'll say is, as anybody that served in this office can tell you, certainly Mayor Wiesa, he's one of the few mayors at this point that served longer than me. I was elected in 2017. It doesn't matter what you do to the salary or the number of all of the staff that you can give to the mayor to help him or her do their job. The mayor's job will always be full-time in cities our size. There will always be citizens that you need to meet with, local business leaders, executing your vision. There's always going to be work that will occupy the mayor well beyond the 9 to 5. So it's really a question of how much are you going to pay a person that's going to dedicate their name and their life and their lifestyle to serving your community. Obviously, I have strong opinions about this, but I think we came to the right decision. So if that experience was helpful to you, I would be glad. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I wish you luck in your meeting and your decision.
I would like you to forward that report to probably our city clerk, and the clerk could disperse that to the committee members, the council members.
Sure. Mayor Payne, if you can't find that email address online, I don't want to throw it out here, but reach out to our offices. 346-1569 is the phone number for the clerk's office.
I will send that, Madam Chair, Mr. Mayor. If it helps anybody, you want to start rapidly Googling now. It's called Municipal Government Structure in Wisconsin. Does Form Matter? It was produced out of the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh in 2016.
Thank you very much. Anybody on the committee have a question for Mayor Payne? Thank you very much for your time logging in and giving us the benefit of your experience. Appreciate it. People from, okay, start with Chief Moody in a suit. I'm impressed. Uh-oh, here we go.
Collectively, staff.
So I would hope by this point, most of the elected officials in the city of Stevens Point would know who I am. But those who don't, my name is J.B. Moody, and I'm the chief of the Stevens Point Fire Department and one of the department directors here in the city of Stevens Point. I'd like to take a minute and point out that I am speaking on behalf of all the directors standing here with me tonight, including Director Lemke was sitting back there, and now he's going to sit over here. So I just wanted to make sure that all of us standing here tonight were united. Collectively, as city directors, the operational backbone of our municipality, we must establish a clear and concise channel of communication with all of you as elected officials. With this being said, there are too many unknowns on the topic to make an informed decision regarding this change in government. We ask, where are the differences and deficiencies that you see that a city administrator would correct? With a holistic approach, there has been no talk, at least in depth, on how elected or departmental input will be integrated, how strategic goals will be aligned, and how we will maintain responsiveness to the community's needs. Ultimately, please remember, you have residential experts in all fields of the city. We pride ourselves on solving problems within a professional manner to make sure all our citizens' concerns are addressed and fixed within this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And thank you, directors. Who's next? Name and address for the record.
Okay, good evening. I'm Liz McDonald, 1760 Strongs Avenue. And I wanted to come tonight to address this issue because I think it's something that has not been widely discussed with the general public. I think the alders are probably well aware of it, as Alder Guthrie indicated earlier, but I think that the public really needs to be informed if you look at making something that would be such a large change in the governance of the city. Something like a general public meeting or perhaps a referendum, something like that. But more information needs to get out before any decision like this would be made. On a personal basis, I've seen my taxes go up very much in the last 2 years. And I'm always in favor of paying taxes for good public service. But I'm not so sure that this would result in good public service. Both our city attorney indicated that there would be some difficulty with determining who reports to whom, or some cross communications that might not be helpful for the running of the city. Also, our city comptroller indicated that we don't have the money to pay for this. And as I mentioned, the taxes, mine have gone up a lot, and I expect everybody else's in the city have done so as well. So when I look back at our several previous mayors, we had Gary Westcott, Andrew Helverson, and now Mike Wiesa. And I imagine that they probably all arrived at this job with a varying level or varying degree of administrative skills. And I think we've done very well as a city over all those years. I know that Mayor Wiesa has a strong personality, and I hope that this suggestion or this potential change in the city governance is not a reaction to what some people might perceive as difficulty in working with our current mayor. So anyway, thank you for your time tonight, and I hope that this is something that we really take a long time to consider before we move ahead. I really appreciated the comments that the Mayor of Superior shared with us as well. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Cheyenne Antel, 3925 Doolittle Drive. I'd also like to commend Jim Payne for his comments. I thought they were really good. I had similar comments that I've brought to our meeting tonight. My concerns are in three parts: the financial, representational, and government efficiency side for our city. So starting with the financial, as has already been said, where will the money for this new administrator come from? We have seen in the meeting notes that just cutting the hours for the mayor and the money we would save that way would not be enough to fund this new position. So I'm nervous about what else could be cut, put off, or curtailed to bring in another position. I'm also concerned about what the financial impact and social impact is of having a part-time mayor instead of a full-time. As someone with 2 jobs, I can say firsthand that having 2 means you can't really devote as much as you want to either. But financially, you end up having to do it. If we have a part-time mayor, we are changing who can afford to run for office, and we are locking some people out of being part of our government. We also currently have a very active representative in our mayoral seat. Mayor Mike Wiesa is strongly active in the community, and I would say firsthand that he's likely working over 40 hours a week already. I know many of you are probably part of Facebook groups, and you will notice that people tag him 24 hours a day, and he responds. You can find him in a grocery store, at a public ribbon cutting ceremony, meeting with business owners, and if you stop him on the street to talk, he doesn't say, "Oh, I'm not working right now, I'm busy." He stops to meet with his representatives. And I'm worried that if we switch to part-time, whoever is that mayor is not going to have the ability financially and socially to meet that. Next, my representational concerns. I have voted for the mayor position, as I know all of you have as well, and so far, Mayor Mike Wiesa has held this position for 10 years. I've been voting for a full-time mayor, and I would like to continue voting to have full-time representation of my interests in this government and to have a full-time person that I can speak with and can point me in the right direction of what city resources I need. I also am interested in someone who can connect the city and the city government to the constituents and the businesses there. Right now, we have a mayor who does that and has the time to do it. Switching to a part-time and splitting up positional duties might mean that no one is able to make those outreach connections. We also right now have a mayor that builds trust in the systems and provides a public connection at events. When you see a mayor out and about with the community, it builds that trust that you have a member of the city supporting whatever this event is. Once we switch to a part-time, we may not see public officials so publicly. Right now, our mayor runs day-to-day operations, meets with developers, business leaders, other executives, helps work on different committees, works a lot with day-to-day city issues, but also the little fires that pop up. If someone has a question, they might not know where to go in city government, and the mayor is the first stop. Once we switch to a part-time, are we going to have someone who can take care of things like senior wellness programs, or who can help connect people to resources? Someone that they can trust. My third part is government efficiency. I know everyone has heard of the idea of delegating tasks, and right now it seems like a mayor has a lot on his plate. However, this is not the role of delegating tasks. We're instead adding another cook to the kitchen, and we're hoping that they can make just as good of a meal. Instead, we are more likely to see no one knowing who reports to who or what tasks need to be done, and I'm worried we're going to see more things fall through the seams and through the cracks. If I'm going to pay more in taxes and see less of my elected representatives, it would be a triple blow to also see more of our concerns slip by the wayside. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. Sean Morrow. I'm the alderperson for Area 11. This past weekend, I canvassed my entire area. One thing I asked every single person was what they thought about this. I only had two folks who said that they wanted to get rid of the mayor, and everybody else was thought that we were nuts. And not everybody liked Mayor Wiese. I got an earful from a lot of folks who really did not like Mayor Wiese, but they liked voting for their mayor. They didn't agree with, and they let me know some of the things that they didn't like about Mayor Wiese. But again, they wanted to vote for their mayor. One of the things that I like about the city council that we have is that we have separation of powers. I like that we have an elected comptroller, we have an elected city attorney, we have an elected clerk. So the mayor or the city council can't go, I want you to find money for this. I want to do this. And then if the city comptroller or the city attorney says no, they don't have to worry about losing their jobs. And that is something that's something that I really like, is the check and balances that we have. One of the other things that was brought up as well is that they said that we should have a town hall. Well, I'm having a town hall on Thursday here at 6, from 6 until 7. But again, I mean, this is something that I asked every single person this whole weekend, was what they thought about this. And I know some of the information is kind of hard to understand. It took me a few times to go through the memos and so on to really kind of understand the shift in power. But one thing I do like is I like being able to vote for the people that I want. Because it takes a long time to vote. It takes a long time to get your campaign going. If you're running for a citywide area, that is different than running for an alder. For an alder, you could run for an alder with very limited amount of funds, and you have to worry about your own specific area. This would make the city council a lot more, this would give a lot more power to this city council. That's a good thing, and that's also a bad thing as well. I've seen alders in the past that have tried to pressure department heads to do what they wanted them to end up doing, and I know the mayor had to step in on that at times. So the check and balances, I think, is very good for the city that we have. Thank you very much.
Who's next? I think with the amount of people, just sort of queue up. Wait over there, yeah.
Madam Chairman, good evening. My name is Andrew Helverson, former mayor of the city of Stevens Point. My address is 501 Wilshire Boulevard. I'm going to surprise a few people with my first sentence in that I fully support the idea of the creation of a city administrator position to bring professional management stability and accountability, as well as consistency specific to our local government. However, I have to tell you that the way in which you're going about this process currently is extraordinarily flawed, misses a great deal of the steps necessary to do it correctly, and maybe more important than anything, absolutely refuses to understand that you retain other dual elected officials and executives retaining specific responsibility that, if you were to do this correctly, has to be consolidated under the authority of a city administrator, which means you have to eliminate the elected office of comptroller treasurer, you have to eliminate the elected office of city attorney, and you have to eliminate the office of an elected city clerk. This approach, if approved as currently designed, sets the city administrator up, if approved, for failure from day one. A professional administrator cannot be expected to bring efficiency and cohesion to city operations if critical functions remain fragmented and unaccountable to the very office designed to lead them. No well-run municipality operates this way, and for very good reason. Cities that have selectively transitioned to a professional management structure have done so by ensuring the administrator has oversight of key administrative functions and all key administrative functions, not by leaving them disconnected and politically driven by other elected offices. And not to mention, it creates, under the current plan, a great deal of conflict for the office of mayor as envisioned under this concept. A city administrator without authority over these critical functions is nothing more than an expensive figurehead costing taxpayers over $200,000 a year with no real power to improve efficiency or accountability across the board throughout all city operations. This is not reform. And to Liz's comments in particular, I'm rather concerned that it isn't reform, that is indeed political gamesmanship about personalities masquerading as progress. I have had my own conflicts with Mayor Wiesa, and quite frankly, over a couple of beers, I think we've certainly buried the hatchet on a lot of topics, and I give him a great deal of credit because I truly do think his heart is in the right place, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for it. But by keeping these other roles elected and by ignoring the other financial challenges of the directors as they shared with you, we maintain a disjointed government structure. We allow politics to override professionalism. We prevent real accountability as it is indeed envisioned, I think, in the vision of what we're approaching for this concept. And we waste $200,000 for creating a position under this plan that really is structurally designed immediately to be ineffective. Additionally, this proposal comes at a time when other critical positions within the city remain unfilled across all departments, and most notably in the police department in particular. If we're truly committed to professionalizing our government, we must do so comprehensively with real thought, planning, and execution, and not do it selectively. The Common Council must recognize that without consolidating oversight and ensuring all key administrative roles are under a single professional, highly credentialed, non-political structure, this effort is doomed to fail from the beginning and is an utter waste of time. I strongly urge the Common Council to rethink this flawed proposal before committing to a costly and ineffective half measure. If we're going to invest in an administrator and indeed give it the authority necessary to operate correctly, we must give it the time and the real credence that it deserves. Anything else is an absolute recipe for continued confusion and perceptual dysfunction of the city operations. I truly urge this particular concept to be voted down in hopes that a more comprehensive approach can be found, and if not, absolutely leave it exactly the way it is, because the structure will work if the mutual checks and balances, as the alderperson said earlier, are allowed to run correctly and with respect. I think you could certainly get there. I would highly recommend staying exactly the way it is rather than going halfway. If you really want to do it, then you need to go the entire way. Thank you.
Well, I have my speech, Bill Bushman, 5516 Elmwood Avenue, on one side of a piece of paper. So Mayor Helverson, ex-Mayor Helverson, thank you. I'm simply, when I looked at this, and I've been trying to follow this, and as somebody had said, trying to find out what's been going on has been very, very difficult. If it wasn't for, in my case, the Plover Metro Wire, I would know nothing about this. I'm not on Facebook, so I would like to give a shout out to the Plover Metro Wire. But as I've read the various articles and opinions, I'm going to reiterate what I think what everybody else has said. This breaks down to need and cost. And I've yet to be persuaded as to need. I've only seen generalities. I've not seen any specific inefficiencies that people keep talking about. It doesn't make any sense to me about having 4 directors not reporting to an administrator. No sense whatsoever. Nobody's convinced me that there's a need for this position. And I think, again, Mr. Helverson, I think, brought up a lot of good points. Mr. Payne, also a lot of good points. Cost. We're running on a paper-thin budget. I think everybody knows that. And one item that was brought up, maybe there could be increased fees. Well, I haven't seen any specifics addressing increased fees. As somebody else brought up, our taxes are already too high, way too high. So I don't think we need another 200,000 into the mix. Small in comparison to the total, but it's the principle. We've got a lot of other projects that need taxpayers' needs, whether it be road construction. They're talking about large adjustments to Gerke Park. There's just numerous other issues that need to be addressed in this city. Some, I think, are pipe dreams. Some are not. As for the mayor position, I don't always get along with Mike. A lot of us probably have had our moments, but I will agree, when I've had a question, I can go to the office and I get an answer. I've yet to buy an ATV, Mike, I'm sorry.
We'll work on it.
And I probably will not. But I think the old expression, if it's not broken, don't try and fix it. And I think that's exactly where we are and what we need to continue. So I appreciate the effort of those who are working on this option. I don't agree with it. I'm recommending that we just go status quo and move on. I'm all about innovation. I don't think this is a good innovation. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Keith Godrowski, 1536 Water Street. Pretty much everything's been said. Mr. Payne was awesome. Like I say, Mike and I, we don't always get along, but we can talk. A lot of people have cut the slack of where this started, and I'm going to say that this was very political. The starter and where it's gone. This is very personal and very political, and it's very disgusting. This is to take away an elected position, and you're going to select them for me because you don't have enough power? So you want to eliminate the guy who can be our buffer? Typical. It's so typical of that side of that bench. Very political, very disgusting, gross waste of money. Thank you.
Dave Iden, city resident. I would like to start by thanking Mayor Payne for his insight from inside of this issue and pointing out the study that was made most recently, which either was not found or neglected by the 2nd District Alder, because this is probably the most recent study regarding the issue. I'd also like to thank Mr. Morrow for his insight, and also former Mayor Halverson, because they've been on the inside of things. They know how it works, and their insight provides more of what we should understand as citizens and community residents. You know, unfortunately, the council doesn't seem to have a problem with spending when it comes to community residents and absconding more tax dollars from them, where we're heavily taxed already, and there's more coming. Most unfortunate. That being the case, Mayor Wiesa in his 10 years in office proves that he's got a majority, and people voted for him for a reason. If you take away the mayor's position and make it a figurehead and add $200,000 plus to an administrator who's only accountable to the council, and what we've seen out of this city council, it's a huge waste of money, and you take away the citizens' ability to choose and vote for their guy. There would be no accountability with an administrator at great expense, and you probably wouldn't even bother, I guess, telling constituents what your intentions are, because you'd just have a rubber stamp and you'd go ahead and do it. And if you wouldn't go along with you, my suspicion is you'd be fishing for another guy who would. You know, a lack of accountability is a huge problem. An elected position, far better. I like Mayor Wiesa. I voted for him in the past. He's the face of the community for a lot of reasons, and I think a lot of people appreciate that. You can like him, you don't have to like him, but he's up there and he's held the seat for 10 years. That tells me something that, you know, he's got some stick-with-itness, and he represents our community. We need to have a mayor. We don't need to expand. Look at yourselves if you really want to try and fix some things. You know, I don't know if that's going to happen. However, you don't go find someone else to do your dirty work, and that's what I see occurring here. Thank you.
Good evening. Mark Christensen, Alder District 1. Some misinformation, some misconceptions out there that I think probably should be addressed. The report that was referred to by Mayor Payne was actually the report that's written by the professor from Oshkosh who presented to this council. It's not that the council is not aware. The council actually took the time to have him come and speak to us personally and give us his perspective on things. And so we are quite aware of that study. He did share various aspects of it, and I think it was a good presentation and very helpful. I think there's also a misperception that there's already an idea in place. We're not at that point yet. At this point, there's still just discussion. It might, the city administrator position, according, when we listen to the proposals from, or the talk from the professor from Oshkosh, he said for cities our size, some of them, there's a whole variety of combinations. Some of them have a full-time city administrator. Some of them have a part-time administrator and combine it with other positions. That hasn't been determined. When we're taking a look at potential costs, all those costs were derived with the assumption that it's a full-time position. That decision has not been made by this council. Council's still in very much in an information gathering and exploratory phase. So it's a lot of the information that's out there has kind of intentionally been put out to be the most costly proposal. The council has looked at reorganizing, utilizing Chapter 62. Under Chapter 62, the city administrator reports to the mayor and to the city council, not just to the city council. Day-to-day operations, the city administrator would be actually right under still underneath the mayor's day-to-day observance. So that's who the city administrator would report to on a daily basis, and then also report to the council on a regular basis as well. But it's not any kind of a power taking away. The League of Municipalities described the reorganization as being something where the mayor still maintains all of those same powers defined in state statute, but does it by their supervision of the city administrator position. They still have the same responsibilities and still have the same amount of power. Council gains none. Right now, our directors, it would be very similar to directors where the majority of our directors, they report to the council and to the mayor. That wouldn't change. I guess I'm a little disenchanted by the fact that there seems to be a lot of information that's put out there as fact that probably isn't, we're not at that point yet. So a lot of the things that you're looking at, talking about the financial impact, until we decide, if we decide to move forward and take a look at it, depending on how it's structured, that's really variable. So we don't know. So asking departments to take a look at budget cuts for 2027 as Chair of Finance, I have no idea what that budget's going to look like. I don't know what net new growth is going to be. I don't know what shared revenues necessarily be for that year. We are going to have some tight budgets. That's a given. And I meet with Mike weekly. We've missed a handful in the whole entire time. But we meet, and Mike and I agree probably 90+% of the time. When we disagree, we can disagree without being disagreeable. And so that's really not it. I think there's a misperception out there, too, that this is a personal thing. It's not. I am the one that began the discussion based on my experience coming from a community that initiated a city administrator. And yes, there were some staffing cuts made. They did find some inefficiencies and were able to save some money that way. I don't know if we would or wouldn't. I do agree that I agree with the former Mayor Halverson, ex-Mayor Halverson, that there are some definite advantages of, I think another thing the council would have to take a look at is whether or not to have the other elected positions be appointed. There are advantages to that because at that point then the city administrator is able to coordinate things between all the various departments. That being said, that's not necessarily a given either. I think everyone thinks that this is something that we're planning on deciding today and implementing tomorrow. We're still in that exploratory phase. This is something that's if it's going to be done, we're looking at having it being done in 2027. That would give a lot of time for the council to take a look and tailor it to be the type of system that would best benefit this city. So I guess I encourage people not to necessarily accept everything that they read as being gospel truth either. If you have questions, reach out to the mayor, reach out to the alders. The more information from the biggest variety of perspectives, I think will probably, that's always been my goal, and I think it would serve the city well. Take the time, don't get all of your information just from one source, and it is hard. But I do think it is something that is worth taking a look at. If after moving forward and taking a look and we decide this wouldn't best benefit the city, then I think we need to choose to maintain status quo. If after taking a look at all the various possibilities, we find a combination that we think would fit well for this city, then I think that would make sense too. But that's all we're doing at this point is just gathering information. Thank you.
Anybody else that has not spoken? Keep short because if you have something new to add.
No. I appreciate what you said, Mark, but I just think we're beating a dead horse. I'm sorry. I like common sense. As I said, I like innovation. But I don't think we need to take the councils, whether this is at a committee level or a full council, to further discuss the concept of this. If you want to do it outside, and I don't know the legality of that, go for it. But don't waste any more time on this. As I said, what we have is not broken. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
Anybody else that hasn't spoken? Okay, we'll bring it back to the committee members.
We had one.
Oh, one more? Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
Carol Malevsky, 2125 Clark. Unfortunately, I got here late because I was still on Saturday time looking at my clocks at home. I had just gotten home. The main thing that I see here is that I hate to see another level put in the government, and I hate to see my vote taken away. And I think that's the basic. I will lose a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay.
Just one point of clarification, and I don't know what people have heard, where they get their information from. I didn't pay anybody to provide testimony tonight, but some of it was pretty touching, and I appreciate that. It's not about me, hopefully, it's about the position, but when Alder Christensen said we're just interested in discussing, the memo outlined says that I am interested in pursuing the addition of a city administrator position effective during the next mayoral election in 2027. Later on, it goes, I will be calling for a vote to move in this direction at personnel. If it passes, you can anticipate the concept coming to for your consideration at a full-on council meeting. So there is reason to believe that a decision is expected tonight because that's what was introduced. The concerns that I have are the same ones that I've expressed before. I still haven't heard a why. What is this position going to do that we can't do now? We've heard efficiencies in department silos and better grants. To me, that's a dig on our directors who have busted their hump for every single year that they've been here, working on a 0% increase in their operational budget for 5 straight years, always doing more with less, always taking advantage of every grant opportunity, even if the application might be in a gray area. Because they know how important it is to leverage every single dime, create every efficiency that we can, and the general practice of working together on all of the projects. I mean, the fact that we have utilities and streets working together on projects, and they work with parks, we get all of the departments working together because it creates the efficiency, and most importantly, saves money. Because they're, again, always being asked to do more with less. We've got positions that were created or approved in 2018 that have gone unfunded. We're still trying to find those things. So the thing that concerns me the most, and I hope it's a concern for others, is we haven't seen that why yet. What are we doing or not doing that we could be doing better? Because I can tell you, I speak for all of the city staff. If there's something we can do better now, let's do it now.
Thank you. Anybody else? Alder Broderick.
So firstly, I want to say thank you to absolutely everyone who's been involved with this, all of the members of the public, and particularly all of the members of staff who have spoken with me and been very patient with me over the last several weeks and months. This has obviously been a lightning rod for a lot of people, in a sense that I personally have only experienced in a way that reminds me of the Walker Street extension, for those of us that remember that from last year. It reminds me of that agenda item in a lot of ways. Number one, just the sheer volume of calls that I have personally received, incomparable. But also in the fact that a lot of people are calling in very, very upset because their understanding of this issue is based on a misapprehension of what's happening. And I think, President Christensen, you have gone quite a way towards addressing that. So when the overwhelming majority of conversations that I've been having are based on misunderstandings, I do want to take some time in this forum to, again, address some of that. We have heard it before, but again, a city administrator would report to the mayor. In addition to council, we would have joint oversight over that position. This change would not reduce the mayor position to part-time. There is not a legal mechanism to do that, as we've heard in previous meetings. The mayor would also have the authority to approve or deny any potential candidate for administrator. So the perception that the council would be forcing someone into this position that inherently had some axe to grind against the mayor is just patently false. So I genuinely don't believe that an administrator position represents any violation of democracy, because that is the message that I have been hearing from constituents, that this is a subversion of our democratic process, and I don't believe that to be the case. What this is an extra layer of resiliency. That is what this is about. Mayors are elected based on popularity, as are alders, but there are 11 of us. Unfortunately, being elected on popularity has very little bearing on your ability to run a city effectively. That requires knowledge, expertise, and experience. Most of the time we do have that. I think we all agree that Mayor Wiese provides that in spades. He's been a very effective mayor, and he's very well liked for a reason. But there are reasons that we are considering this, right? We have heard that an admin can come in with knowledge that will enable us to identify more grants and have more approved. I personally don't know if I subscribe to that, because we do have such an incredibly effective staff. We have seen data that does suggest that there is a lower tax rate on average in municipalities with an admin model, consistently higher ratings and collaboration. That did come from the same academic body putting out the paper that was mentioned earlier, UW Oshkosh. They have actually released a number of papers on the subject that I highly recommend everyone checks out. You can see that in previous meetings here, since, again, some of those researchers were here speaking to us in the past. But the main thing here, the main thing that this fixes is that it adds a minimum standard of accountability, knowledge, and expertise to our executive branch, which ideally we will always have, but we are trusting that we will elect someone with those qualities and not hiring someone that we can guarantee has those qualities. So it's about resilience. I personally have been going back and forth on this for months at this point. I think that there are very compelling arguments to be made in both directions. I do personally believe that the administrator model in conjunction with the mayor is a better form of government for a lot of reasons that we've heard. But I don't support this tonight. I don't think that the getting there is appropriate based on what we've laid out now. I think that there's a lot of legitimate debate about whether or not this kind of change should require a referendum. That is a very legitimate question and something that I have talked about with constituents. Ultimately, I want to remind everyone how we all got here as alders. We were elected duly. That is the idea behind a democratic republic, that you elect someone to make decisions on your behalf. It would, of course, be ridiculous if we went to direct democratic referendum majority for everything we have to decide for the city. There's a time and a place for that. With that being said, I don't think this is a change that we should go ahead with if we don't have support from all parties involved. And it is very clear that this has been portrayed in such a way that I don't believe that that's possible right now. And that is a shame, because I do believe that this can be an incredibly effective model of government. So again, I will not be supporting this tonight. I would like to see the council focus on other ways to establish that long-term vision and resilience. Much of that is already underway. We have a comp plan rewrite in progress. We're looking at a comprehensive zoning code reform, which will be hugely impactful for the city. We have a facilities plan in progress as well. I think continuing to work on those documents will help us work towards that resilience in a way that is financially more cost-effective and ultimately less divisive. So thank you for the time and all the great communication, everyone.
Thank you, Alder Broderick. Alder Steinmetz.
I can't support this tonight because when I was running, I made it clear that I wanted to represent the desires of the people of District 6, and I've never had more contacts about an issue, and not one person reached out and said, I'm really excited about the idea of an administrator. It strikes me as a pretty expensive insurance policy. If 2027 rolls around and we end up with someone popular but not competent in the mayoral seat, then maybe it's time to revisit. But it seems like a risk, and what if we don't get the return? It's a hard sell for me.
Thank you. Alder Lang.
I'd like to just start by thanking all the directors I've been able to have conversations with, the other committee members here that have brought this discussion to this point. We would not get this far if it had not been for the work of Alder Guthrie, Kneebone, Broderick, Steinmetz. Like we've got to this point only through you guys' work, and I feel like we're still a bit of a way from getting to like clarity that I'd feel comfortable with supporting or not supporting. So tonight, when I look at, we finally have a job description that we're actually kind of considering here, and it's one of these like, what are we going to do with it? What is it? That's something I feel like deserves further discussion, and maybe isn't tonight the night that we talk about it. It's gone on for a long time. But hearing tonight from the people has been its own, say, eye-opening. The former mayor, Halverson, brings forward several things. Are we going about it the right way? I feel this is a bit of a rush. There's only so many ways you can do it and make it effective, and from my understanding and the data that I've been presented, it means elimination of a comptroller, or it means elimination of our clerk, which means because you're going to put these things, that role, that duty into that office. So it's not just the mayor. Everybody's conversation has been focusing on one elective office, and there's actually 3 that are up for discussion here, plus one that's not elected, the zoning administrator. If you look at the data we've been presented. Now, you pool all those wages, yeah, we got enough money to hire. You're looking at over $400,000 in wages. An administrator don't cost that much. The mayor and his salary, it doesn't rise to that. So like when we put these wages together and you're thinking, how would we afford these things? You're eliminating a comptroller, you're eliminating a clerk, possibly the attorney. If that's what we can do as we piece together and consider what a city administrator is, I think the money's there to play with. But it's like, where do we reallocate it? Those are discussions that I haven't had yet. Those are the things that I want to have answers to before I'd feel comfortable supporting. Does the city administrator that we are considering absorb our comptroller, our clerk's office? I don't know that yet. From what I've got from the attorney in here, in his memo, what is that? How does that say? I want to get his words right. Which one is it in the agenda? Second one?
You can use my hard copy if you want.
Oh, okay. As we go about implementing this thing, key aspect of implementing a city administrator is clear understanding about authority. That's the thing that I feel we haven't clarified yet. Where is the authority that we are considering taking and delegating to this role? If it's going to be comptroller, if it's going to be that clerk's office, if it's going to come from the mayor, what does that look like? And that's where I'm like, we have to discuss that yet. We can make a city administrator many ways. It's up to our creativity on sort of, and like which roles go where. But you're talking about eliminating potentially 3, well, not eliminating 2 potential elected offices. The mayor would still remain. Yes, you're still going to be able to elect your mayor, but as I understand it, the potential anyways is there, and we haven't clarified if we're going to do it or not. A comptroller, a clerk could be gone. Potentially, as Halverson brought forward tonight, also the city attorney. I had not heard that yet, but is that a thing that we can still like look into and study further? I didn't hear that until tonight, but apparently a city attorney also could be the 3rd eliminated elected office. Now, the people that I've talked to have like, yeah, I want to have my voice. I want to have my people representing my voice. And I think eliminating or potentially eliminating any elective office, we should be going to referendum. If the people's support's there and you want to eliminate this thing, like be it a clerk, be it the comptroller, if we're going to do that, I think a referendum would be in order. But I don't know yet what we're looking at for that clarification of when we're considering a city administrator, it's this, the roles, the duties, the authorities that we delegate to that are X, Y, and Z yet. And I want to have those discussions so that I can support it, but I think we're not there yet. The other thing that happened tonight that I feel maybe I need our attorney in here is I feel like there's a separation of a question that's in order. Because after hearing the public, after hearing from my informational interviews with our city employees, I would like to understand something first before I move forward. Could the attorney come here?
You have a question for the city attorney?
I have a question
Okay.
for the city attorney.
I guess if Attorney Beveridge would come in from the overflow room.
Thank you.
So I heard your comments in the other room, but I'm not quite sure I understand exactly what you're asking.
Well, my question has not been posed yet. My question to you would be, because as I understood from what I'm hearing, there seems to be this in the public appearance that this is a personalities thing, that this is personal. And if there is such a thing, how would we go about investigating that? Is this the why, Mayor, of why are we here? Is it potentially, how would I say this, more than, okay, Mike's a hard guy to get along with? This is where I'm like, how would we go about having that process of discussions? If there's that separate question of, has there been misconduct on some level in this entire process?
I think that's not exactly germane to this discussion.
That's why I asked, is that a point of order, separate question? How do I go about that? Because I feel that has arose from these discussions, that there is something underlying this, that there's this tension, there's this conflict that we're not discussing, but I'm hearing it, that there is personality motivating this. And do we need a independent investigation committee into the conduct? Is that why we're here? Because I'm hearing that.
I need to interject here for a second. Are you alleging some sort of misconduct at some level?
I'm not. That's why I'm asking. How would we go about it? To clear the air. I don't know.
So I guess I'm not.
We have to go into a closed session to talk about it.
Well, we certainly can't do that tonight.
Okay.
Here's what I would say. If what you're asking about is whether there are personality conflicts that exist.
If it rises beyond that, because that's what I'm hearing, is like, it's not just that.
So the way that investigations of the type that you're discussing come to be is that they start with there being specific allegations.
Okay.
And unless and until there are, how would you even direct some outside authority to do such an investigation? Now, here's what I would suggest, and this is not legal advice, it's just me as a human being who works in an office and deals with office politics and all that kind of stuff. To whatever extent you would like to become more knowledgeable about the personality interactions of city staff, the mayor's office, other electeds, pick up the phone and call these people and ask them.
Sure. And that's
you might find it's a surprisingly effective methodology. You might find people are, not extremely forthright and candid about that type of stuff, but that's just, human nature, right? I mean, so, don't expect people to just, put their coworkers or, their supervisors under the microscope in a really brutal way. We all work within, structures where we depend on each other and have to be able to work together. So, you might be frustrated with somebody this week about something, but you might overall get along pretty well. And like I said, that's just normal office stuff, people working together. It doesn't matter whether it's public sector, private sector, a family. Those work the same way too. So there's not really a strong legal point in there anywhere, but
so if there were allegations reported in my informational gathering of misconduct, where would we go?
Well, okay, this is where I'm going to say, look, not only is this not germane to the agenda item, it's really not.
It's a separate question.
But also, this isn't really a great context for me to talk to you about that type of thing.
I'm asking, does this need to go to a closed session to have this discussion?
Well, I would rather just, let's leave this line of discussion where it is for now. And if you believe that there's been something brought forward that is deserving or needing attention in that way, let's talk about it in a private context.
I believe what I have here is I've been told things in my information gathering that are being underpinned, but just nobody wants to say out loud for some reason. And I feel maybe that's why I'm talking to you here is, as a trustee, there's certain things that have to be discussed about discipline in a closed session. And I'm asking you, what is the appropriate motion to move to that discussion? Because I do not believe it is the appropriate.
There is no motion that would be in order on this agenda item with the way the agenda is structured.
The question is what I'm asking. Is there a separation of the question in order?
Okay, I'm going to be a little more blunt now.
Please.
Your comments, in my opinion, at this point have gone well beyond the agenda item confines, and I'm not going to participate in the conversation further.
Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Beveridge. I agree, and we will not go down that road any farther. I would hope that if any city employee feels that they are in a toxic workplace, that they would report to the appropriate level of supervision, and then at that point, an investigation would go forward on a legitimate complaint. I have not heard anything like that, but then.
May I?
No.
Okay.
Not anymore. This will be.
I would do the specifics if you did. Okay.
Not in this forum. It's not on this agenda. It's not an agenda item, and we will not discuss it any longer. And I want to say right now, the agenda item says possible action, not action. We're having this discussion because that's what we do. As city committees, we look at things. We do not fear civil discussions about any issue. In my mind, this has never been about a personality. It's always been about the best way to position the city to move forward in uncertain political times, not knowing perhaps where money may come from, and knowing that it can't all fall on our taxpayers. We are at a discussion stage, as has been said. I don't feel a motion tonight is appropriate either. I think there's a lot more that needs to be looked at. I think one could make a good case about hiring a professional clerk, a professional attorney, a professional comptroller treasurer, rather than leave that to the whims of popularity, because all of the elected positions are important to the city. But at this point, I'm not in favor of changing anything, but I'm in favor of letting the discussion continue over time to see if it's something, if we can find ways to position the city to be better able to move forward. I'd like to see directors look at ordinances, and if there's a way to change some wording in an ordinance that would make their department run better, or a personnel policy that we could tweak that might give us some efficiency in how things are run. But to add another level of supervision, to be able to afford that position, when we can't afford to hire a police officer or a firefighter, or give department staff budget increases. I don't think this is the right thing to do at this point in time, but I feel the discussion is worth having as we go forward. And that, I'll let Alder Guthrie have the last word.
Yeah, I don't know if this will wrap it up or open additional conversation, so I'll just say that one of the reasons that I called the question tonight was because we've been discussing this as a committee and hearing from experts for approximately a year. And it feels like a responsible thing for a subcommittee that would be taking the first step in what would be a future implemented change, to do so in a timely manner if we're going to do it at all, so that we can be transparent, humane, and give staff that would be involved in making that change ample time to do so effectively and correctly, and so that we had time to implement and communicate, right? And so, especially with an election coming up, with what you could say a new elected session or a new legislative section coming with, staff may be changing out of who's on what committee. It felt appropriate to call the question because we have been involved in those conversations, right? We have been charged with making a decision, and to let that go into the next legislative session, if you think of it that way, is like when a bill comes to the floor of Congress or to the State House. If it's not acted on within that legislative session, it goes to die, and then it gets re-entered when a new legislative session is sat, because it's potentially different people. So that's why I called the question now. We've already been talking about this for a year. So I'm hearing people say, I'd like to keep talking about it. My question to you is, for how long, and what other information would you want? And would that set us up to make a decision in a timely manner for what would be the next mayoral election? Or are we talking about, oh, well, I'd love to continue talking about this forever in personnel, and maybe someday, to Alder Steinmetz's, if the mayor is not the right fit and the committee is very concerned, then maybe we can act because we had these discussions back then. None of us might be sitting on this body then. So out of respect for the staff that would be involved, and because change takes time, I called the question tonight, and would just ask you to comment on, if we're not going to take a vote tonight, what else do you need, and what kind of time frame makes sense to you given some of those changes that are coming? Because I'm failing to see how punting this question down the road actually gets us closer to making a decision. I recognize that folks are contacting all of us, that they have feelings, that they're reading about things or talking to their neighbors, and they have ideas about what this means or doesn't mean. It can be uncomfortable if we don't decide to put this forward to council tonight so that staff have enough time to start to implement, and we have enough time to consider budgetary changes that would take effect for 2027, then what's the alternative? And I would entertain any comments.
I have a fairly straightforward answer for that, I think, which
Please.
is, as I mentioned towards the end of my comments earlier, I think that we should wait until some of our guiding documents have been formalized. We have a comp plan rewrite in progress. We have a zoning code reform in progress. Even just with those two documents, if we were to wait to reassess this until we had those in place, I think it would make sense to have an admin suited to come in to have that vision more established in a way that isn't so reliant on individual members of committees, since, like you mentioned, those do change on a shorter time frame than those sorts of long-term planning aids. So that would be my proposal, is to wait until we have both a zoning code reform and a comp plan in place as a fairly objective measure there.
Is that a motion to postpone to a certain?
Not yet.
We wouldn't need, well, I'll let the chair to speak to that. Sorry.
I just lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
I don't believe there's any action necessary in order to do that.
I would actually like to ask the directors to look at their personnel policies, to look at how ordinances might be tweaked to give them a little more control over, what happens, to maybe give them some efficiencies that they might not already have. If they know of a personnel policy that really makes things a little more difficult, maybe we could tweak that.
And we can certainly ask staff to do that. I got to tell you, Madam Chairman, though, they do that every single month. You get policy changes when the staff makes recommendations. We listen.
Well, we changed parking
Every month we have something, but certainly appropriate to ask again, or continue to ask.
If there are things, if there are none, then let us know that. But if there are some things that could be changed at that level, a policy, an ordinance, something, let us know. That's easy to do, doesn't cost anything. If I'm sure, given the challenges with funding over the last few years, I know they're doing their absolute best because they've had to save money because they haven't had the money to spend. It's been that simple. If there are ways we could change some ordinances, let's do that. If they're fine as they are, let's investigate that. Personnel policies may need to be tweaked, let's look at that. And if not, then let them stand. Perhaps come back after our comp plan is done, the zoning rewrite, that makes sense. We wouldn't have to do it for 2026 or 2027. I don't know. Anybody else?
Things that I'm looking for is a real clear job description for something that has both the ordinance attached to it. Appreciate that. Like, thank you for giving us a draft ordinance to consider. Maybe a salary attached just for thoughts on it, because I know we've had, like, what is in here, how many of them? Like, we have a lot of salaries to go from. I've done the averages and such. Just a clear, fleshed out position. Like, what are we considering here? Is that position going to eliminate one of the other electeds, or do we have a position that it doesn't do that? And those are the things that I'd like to see before I can come forward with a clear support or unsupported position on.
By the way, Sam, I would just note for the public that the agenda materials do include a sample job description as well as a financial breakdown from the comptroller's office. So if anybody cares to look, there's quite a lot of detail in there, including also a sample employment contract. Typically, these are hired on a contract basis, as well as an administrative policy and an ordinance to make the position come into existence.
And that's where I see it, like, there's really not a lot of teeth there. And it's set up to fail because there isn't nothing in there. And that's kind of where I'm like, I'm glad we have it here for discussion, but, like, as I've seen for other ordinances, like, this almost isn't a city administrator position because you don't have the authorities that are often absorbed from a clerk, from a comptroller in there.
So just to clarify, the reason that I wrote it in the way that you're describing right now is that to do those types of changes, whether it's to take certain positions that are currently elected and have them not be elected, or to take executive functions from currently held by the mayor per statute and allocate those to an administrator would require a referendum. And in speaking with Alder Guthrie and just looking at the law and everything, I drafted this in a fashion where it could be implemented without having to go to a referendum. Now, if there is a desire to see what that stuff would look like with a referendum, obviously we can have that discussion, but it was just based upon my understanding that that was not the route it seemed the council was looking to go down.
May I also speak to that? Folks may or may not recall that, again, approximately a year ago, when this conversation was starting, we asked for detailed leadership organizational charts in current stance. We asked for detailed ordinances that would need to be revised in order to make this change. And Attorney Beveridge aptly said, could I spend hundreds of hours doing that to implement this entire change? Who would call the snow emergency? The mayor of the city? Could I present all of that to you in draft form? I could. Instead, how about I present just a few of the the key documents so that council can give us direction on whether or not this is a road that they want to go down, so that then we can get into some of those details, such as who would call the snow emergency. And I think that that's a really reasonable use of staff time to provide what has been provided so that we can issue either a furtherance or stand back. We're not going to do this. And thank you, staff, for putting in the time that allowed us to consider this. So I want to thank again Attorney Beveridge for providing what feels like a reasonable amount of work to guide us. If you, Alder Lang, feel like there's something key missing, such as I really would want to know exactly what referendum and position combinations we would want to commit to before even determining whether or not we want to do this, that's not an unreasonable question, and it would take quite a bit more conversation, which it sounds like Attorney Beveridge would be happy to entertain making. But this all takes staff time, right? And if all of this is about efficiencies, there's reasonable questions about it.
Just to clarify, I mean, like the materials that I put in there are, it's what, 13 pages or so minus the memorandum.
Yeah.
That is the meat and potatoes of the documentation we take here. So the additional stuff is kind of, pulling up, chapters of city ordinance and keyword searching for mayor and seeing if there's, one or two occurrences of it in there amongst our, our ordinance governing streets and sidewalks, or, all kinds of grab bag miscellaneous things. So that is a bit less important to the overall discussion, but even with some of the changes that would necessitate a referendum, the ultimate form that these documents take wouldn't change a whole lot. It's just you'd have a couple little extra steps and then some relatively small actual language changes in there. But obviously then it becomes quite a bit different political proposition. So.
I guess that kind of encapsulates my misgivings on the thing. Without that data yet, because we get to discuss that at council later on. But as the committee here in personnel, having that discussion before we forward something on, that's I guess what I feel the people are missing as well. Is this is not hashed out. We don't have the clear idea of what we are even considering. We have someone who brought forward just why are we even considering this sort of thing? The consideration that I want to make is one of an informed consideration. And yes, it may be more work for that office to get that information to us, but I feel like the public deserves that information just as much as you and I do before we have a decision made, because that informs their support of anything. And I am here to represent my people, and their support is what's important. If they don't have the information in front of them yet, I hear you. We need to get you more information.
What specifically would you like in addition?
I would like to see, just as Alder had described there, I guess it's 100 hours of your time, but to have that compare and contrast option of what does that city ordinance look like when we have what we have in front of us, compare that to what it looks like if you eliminate the comptroller and the clerk. That'd be a starter. What does that look like? Where do my people know what they're asking? I would say what they're being asked. I don't think so, because they have not been put in front of them. Hey, here's your clerk, here's your comptroller eliminated, here's the authorities that have been taken from your mayor. That is not in front of us yet.
I guess I would maybe suggest that is something we could look at other cities that have implemented this model, rather than asking us to reinvent the wheel a little bit, to do that work before we've made the decision of whether we're going to commit to that.
Okay. I've looked at several model ordinances across there. I've looked at a couple different cities.
Make no mistake, I did not draft these documents from scratch.
I know.
There was a lot of R&D in there, by which I mean rip off and duplicate. You do not get points for originality in public policy.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's what we're doing, so we don't have to waste the time. Does anything here appeal to our people that is represented in another municipality? Or are we just going to reject it outright? But before that's in front of our people, I don't know if I can support.
Alder Lang, with all due respect, I did go through some of our ordinance chapters and at least look at what some of these additional changes would look like. I can tell you with absolute sincerity, they're utterly dull and uninteresting. I'm talking about pulling up the chapter on water and sewerage systems, and there might be one instance of the word mayor in there. And it's the mayor would appoint the members of the Board of Water and Sewerage Commissioners for confirmation by the council, which guess what? Would not change under a city administrator system. That would still be an appointment made by the mayor. So as someone who has spent quite a few hours already looking at this, I would highly encourage you to form an opinion about this change based upon the documentation that was included in the packet. I feel that that information is sufficient on which to make a decision. There's a fully fleshed out job description in there. There's a full contract in there. There's an ordinance. There's financial breakdowns. Like, the extra stuff you're asking for would quickly be put by the wayside when laid out on the table alongside the rest of the documents. I'm telling you, it's not all that interesting. But if you'd like to come by my office and take a look at some of those examples, I'd be happy to show them to you.
Who's administering elections if we still have a clerk and we have a city administrator?
The elections are administered by the clerk per state statutes.
Okay, but the city administrator, this is what, like, we're having a description here put in front of us, is like that's what they do.
Alder Lang, we have not discussed at all eliminating or merging the clerk, the comptroller, treasurer, and the attorney into a city administrator position. In my mind, they are separate.
Okay.
One could argue that whether they would be hired or elected, but not that they would be eliminated.
This is what I'm looking at here, Mary. It says, it is common for administrative
For
positions to be
very
combined.
small communities,
Right, and we're just-
it is common. This is not a very small community.
We're a city of
It would be like, I don't know, Tomahawk through 3,500 people. You might have an administrator there that does zoning and does public utilities because they're an engineer. I don't think that is not part of this discussion, that those would be merged into the administrator position. I would like to see them hired, not elected, but that would be something I would want to take to the voters as well. But that's a whole nother discussion for another time on another agenda.
I'm also unsure that you would find any candidates for the administrator position that are interested in a job if it included administration of the elections.
I don't want it.
I think the clerk's position is safe.
I'm glad we got that on the record.
Anybody else? I think we've, at this point.
Would you mind if I made just one more comment?
Certainly, go ahead.
I think what I'm hearing today, and again, I appreciate the rich conversation, is that the members of the Personnel Committee are not comfortable supporting this evening, given what we know, or look forward to additional documentation from the city or furtherance of different practices before we would revisit this, which seems like a reasonable place to pause. It doesn't sound like the majority of the members of this body are interested in seeing more detailed work from staff that would further the immediate conversation, because that is not going to be germane to changing decisions that would render a different vote. Did I summarize that accurately?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, then I will not be moving to consider this evening, and thank the chair and the body and the community members that came out for the rich discussion.
not to say we won't bring this up again or look at other ways to make the city the best it can be, but it just doesn't seem like it's the right time. But it doesn't mean it's a bad discussion. These are the things we need to do at our committee levels. Talk about visions and decide if it's a way that the city wants to go. It's an opportunity for the public to interact and let, other than reaching out via phone or email, it's a way to come forward and say what you think and have everybody hear your opinions. We have nothing to fear from civil discussions, and hearing no more, we'll call the committee adjourned at 8:25.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.